Assalamu Alaykum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the first episode of the Arc of Thoughts podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be discussing the issue of materialism and Muslims. We're not going to be able to cover everything that we want to cover. There's a lot to discuss within this topic. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to come up with three sections that we want to discuss and we want to talk about. We've just wrote a couple of notes maybe on each. The whole plan around this podcast is to keep it unscripted, to keep it raw, to talk whatever comes to our mind at that particular time, and we can go from there. So the three sort of topics that we want to talk about is how do we as Muslims in this country or in the West, how do we use the money that we have, or maybe that we don't have and we're still using? How are we, generating our income? And maybe I might talk about some tips and tricks. And finally, the last thing that I want to talk about, and that's quite of interest to me, is get rich quick schemes. I want to discuss about the kind of things and the kind of pitfalls that some of the youth that we know have fallen into, some of the things that exist out there, because sometimes as elder brothers, elder sisters, or maybe even ourselves, we're involved in schemes like this with high hopes, high expectations, and we lose big. And it can have big impacts, not just on our lives, on the lives of our family members, but also for our long-term future as well. So let's get started.
Let's get into it.
Yeah. So Kasim, we want to talk about the money and how we use the monies. How we use money that we have or money that we don't have. How do you see Muslims in the West currently utilizing money?
I think it's very important to look at different aspects. We had our parents and that generation. Understand what I'm saying? That generation may not have been educated. Maybe our mothers and our fathers didn't go to university like we did. But I can hand on my heart say that, alhamdulillah, they have a lot more sense and they actually understood economics better than we do. You have a lot of people now who have gone through the education system, who've gone to university, who've got degrees, yet they've fallen into this trap of materialism. For example, the background for us is that we are actually immigrants to this country. Our parents came from maybe India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. For the majority of Muslims in Britain, this is our background. And our parents came and they worked in manual labour jobs. So a lot of our fathers used to work in the mills. And then, after that, they used to work, as taxi drivers, or did work in restaurants, or whatever jobs there were. Very few had the opportunity to actually go to university and to get a degree and to make an actual career out of their life. And our mothers, most of them, are housewives. Alhamdulillah, Islam and our culture is very well intertwined. So, they were at home, looking after the house, looking after their expenses. And many of our parents, some of them may not even be able to speak English. But what I see is that, alhamdulillah, the elder generation, they were very, very smart in their mind. They came to this country, they earned money, but they saved money. And they only spent on those things which are necessities, on those things which they needed. And why am I mentioning this? Because if you look at their generation now, our generation, the guys in their 20s and 30s, we seem to be educated, as they want to say in the West, yet we fall into all the pitfalls that our parents or the elderly people used to tell us about. For example, the first issue that we will talk about is finance. Everybody now has some sort of thing in his life on finance. And for me, when I see finance, first of all, I see a person, he's spending money that he doesn't have. He's aspiring for something which may be of the latest model. And the third thing is, most of the time, he doesn't even need that thing. So it's just a very basic thing. How many people now have their cars on finance? Okay? This might offend some people, but how many people have their cars on finance? The average car on finance, let's just break it down, £200, £300. The top end costs £350, £450. So a person is spending £400 a month for a car that he doesn't even own. He has to put a deposit down. And if he doesn't make the payments every month, then I'm sure most of them, some of them, they are 0% interest, but most of them they get charged interest at a ridiculous rate. And then after that, just say a person was to lose his job, like look what happened in COVID. A lot of people, they went to furlough, or their wage got cut, or they did lose their jobs, and they had all these things on finance, and they couldn't make these payments. And people are putting themselves into these desperate positions just to look good in front of others. You know. And for me, a car is a car. It takes you from A to B. It doesn't need to be the latest car. As long as it's a good car and it works and doesn't have any problems, you're more safer purchasing a car like our parents did, which did the job, rather than getting the latest model, which, yeah, it looks nice, but in reality, it's actually causing you more problem than actually gain, because the money that you spend every month, that's money gone out of your bank account. At the end of the 3 years of your lease, you don't even own the car. If you do want the car, you've got to pay 10, 15 grand for the car. For me, that doesn't make sense.
Definitely. Yeah, I think
you might want to add to you.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. It's a question that a lot of times what happens is the peer pressure of your community, of society, given it just sort of spirals. Once one person does it, then the next does it, then the next does it, then the next does it, and it's just going to continue. We're just going to keep going down that rabbit hole. And like I said, I think the problem is that it's not a need, it's a want. We have no problems with spending money on things which are luxurious, you know. That's not the problem here. The problem here is it doesn't make sense financially for you to put yourself into a situation like that. You know, even if you go to buy a low spec car, it's going to cost you a lot more to buy that car brand new, and immediately that car is going to lose its value. Okay, it's ridiculous the amount of value that a car loses within the first 3 years of its life.
Just have to be driven off the.
Yeah, as soon as it gets 1 mile on the odometer, it's lost value.
Like what, 5-6 grand of value straight away after doing 1 mile. It's crazy.
Yeah, normally within 3 years of a car coming out of the showroom, most likely it's lost half of its value. If you don't believe me, just go on Auto Trader and check. You know, what's the difference between the car that you might be looking at to buy brand new and that same car that's a 3-year-old model. Okay, and that's ridiculous. You know, half your money. We're not talking about a few £100 here. We're talking tens of thousands of pounds. Okay, especially given that we touched upon in the first episode that the Muslim demographic is one that is not of a high socioeconomic background. Then this is really important, because we're spending money on those things which we don't necessarily need, which aren't important, which means we can't spend the money on the things which are important, which are needed. And that's the problem, you see?
And the problem is that these things which are on finance, it's all for that materialistic gain of looking good. But the thing is, who are you trying to impress? Okay, because you've got a good car in 2021, but in 1 year's time or in 6 months, the latest model is going to come out. Then it's going to come out, and it's just going to keep going, and you're never going to get out of that race. And one thing I do want to mention here, I did ask his permission before as well, is that once you go to a certain level of a lifestyle, it's very, very hard to come down from it. You got what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just say you're driving a brand new Range Rover, to go down to just say a Vauxhall Astra, for example, it's very, very hard. Why? Because society automatically thinks, what's happened to this guy? With 1 second, this guy was driving a nice car. Why is he driving a normal car, as we would say? You know. And for people, as you mentioned, the peer pressure is too much. You know. So I just want to mention one story of a youth in our own community who went through the struggle, and alhamdulillah, through the will of Allah, that he came over it. So one of our friends called Amir Malik, we'll link his YouTube channel in the description as well, is that he's one of our friends. I've known him since I was 5 years old. A very, very simple person. Very, very simple person. Alhamdulillah, you know, he just prays his salah, comes to the masjid. But in terms of deen or anything, not very educated, as you would say, you know, just very simple. Alhamdulillah, just does what he needs to do. So alhamdulillah, he didn't even buy his car on finance. He bought a BMW 3 Series, you know, the blue one that he had. MashaAllah, you know, he bought it out in money. He had the cash, you know. So when he bought it, I said, you know, MashaAllah, alhamdulillah, nice car. And he goes, yeah, this was like always one of my desires. You know, this was my dream car. I said, MashaAllah, it's good, you've done it. I said, it's not on finance. He goes, alhamdulillah. Then after 6 months, a year, he comes to me and he goes, you know what, a lot of people are my friends now, because I've got this car. People are always asking me, oh, when you're taking us out, when we're going here, when you're going there. And then a year later, he said to me, he goes, I don't want this car anymore. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you know that desire, because it's gone, you know, the novelty is worn off. So he said, what shall I do? So I just said to him, why don't you just sell it, just get a normal car? And he goes, Yeah, like I might as well. Like I've got the car I always wanted, my dream car, and now that novelty's gone, the buzzer's gone. I might as well. So alhamdulillah, he sold his BMW 3 Series, which looked very very nice, mashallah, and he just bought a normal car. And he goes to me at the time that he was selling his car. Loads of his friends, loads of people saying to him, "Is everything all right? You know, you're not depressed. What's going on? Why are you downgrading? Why are you not upgrading?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I just need to get a car to get from A to B. Why do I need to drive a car which is this expensive when I can just get a normal car which is less expensive and save some money on the side and use it for other things which are beneficial for me?" So that he sold his car and now he just drives a normal car, and he goes to me, he goes, "I'm the happiest I've ever been." You know, he goes, some of those friends went away just because of the car, but he goes, alhamdulillah, he goes, "I'm the happiest I've ever been." He goes, "It was a big hurdle though." He goes, "You know, that pressure of society to go over it was very, very difficult." But he goes, alhamdulillah, through the will of Allah, I did it. And I think that if a person like Amir Mali can do it, somebody that we know, then a lot of other people can do it and get over that societal pressure.
Yeah, definitely. Completely agree. I think the thing to mention here though is, Kasim, is we're not talking about it from a perspective of permissibility Islamically. You understand? Obviously, we aren't trained to deliver the reasoning behind that, nor give the fatwa ourselves. Okay, so we're not talking about permissibility. We're talking about whether it makes logical sense to do these kind of things.
Sense,
you know. And I think like a lot of times, what happens is people jump into these kind of contracts and stuff, and they don't actually know what the contract is stating, what's actually going to happen during the contract, what's going to happen at the end of the contract. Do you own the car? Who owns the car? Like during a finance contract, who is the liable owner of the car? Are you the liable owner? Is the garage that you bought it from, are they the liable owner? What happens at the end of the contract? How much do you need to pay? A lot of time, honestly, like people don't actually know, like what's the amount that I need to pay at the end of the contract that I signed up for.
It's all in that small, small writing, isn't it?
No,
most people just see the car.
Yeah.
Most people see the car. That's what they want.
Yeah.
They sign anything which is put in front of them and they hand over whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't even know what the interest rate is. Maybe what is it? Some like 24%. Crazy. If you miss a payment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's big trouble. You need to be careful about the way that you manage your money. You need to be careful about the way that you spend your money. And especially in schemes like this, the problem is you don't know what's going to happen in your life within the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Okay? The length of the span of the contract that you signed up for, you don't know what's going to happen in your life. Halat, conditions can come upon us. And our conditions can change. Doesn't matter how rich we are now or how much we're earning now, it's not going to make much of a difference. If something happens in our life which causes drastic change, then it could have a heavy influence on our finance. And that person who is heavily involved in finance deals and these kind of contracts, then he's just asking for trouble and putting himself in a huge dilemma. You see, the problem is, Kasim, when something like that happens, and you know, we pray to Allah that it doesn't happen to people, to anybody.
To anybody,
okay? But when things like that happen, you go into a deeper hole. You go further down the rabbit hole. And that's the only way that you feel is a way out of it. And this is the issue, you see. But let's move on. We've talked about finance. One of the things that I wanted to caveat here is we don't really want to talk about mortgages at the moment.
No.
I think that deserves like an entire separate conversation. Home purchase plans, which are as seen as the Islamic solution, which some scholars advocate for, some scholars don't. I know that there's a debate amongst people. And also a lot of people who are non-scholars, who are looking to maybe buy a house, they sort of debate about not the permissibility, but more the ethics behind home purchase plans. And also about the conventional mortgages as well, because obviously we need to talk about that. But let's leave that, let's sideline that.
Let's leave the finance, okay.
Next thing that we want to talk about is, and I think weddings maybe sits close with finance deals, finance packages.
I think it's a huge issue in our community which we need to speak about and address. So I'll let you lead on this one because alhamdulillah you've been married.
Just because I'm married doesn't mean that I can be the only one that talks about this. But yeah, as Kasim mentioned as well, you know, a lot of people spend a lot of money at weddings just for one-off things. You see, like I said before, I'm not advocating for a person to live a life in which he doesn't spend money. I understand the need to spend money on luxurious things as well. I remember one of my friends, he mentioned to me once, and I won't say who, but he said to me, you know, when your kids are screaming in the back of the car and they're all crying and you're driving that nice Beamer down the motorway, you know, if your kids are screaming and they're giving you a hard time, at least in your heart you'll think, yeah, I'm driving a nice car and I'm sat in luxury wherever I'm going, right? And if you can afford it, if you can afford that kind of lifestyle, and if you can afford that thing, then by all means go ahead and treat yourself, treat your family, look after your friends. No harm in doing that. But when it comes to weddings, the problem that I see is we've gone away from this concept of it being a happy occasion and calling people to enjoy the occasion with us, more to calling people to see what we can show off about.
Yeah.
You see, and there's a subtle difference between the two. One is, the Prophet ﷺ, when a nikah would take place in the time of the Sahaba, the Prophet ﷺ, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is to feed people, is to do walima and to feed people. So the feeding was to partake in the joyous occasion, and to be aware that a wedding had taken place. Okay, but we've come away from that. Our job of inviting people to weddings is to show them the might and the strength of our finance, the money that we don't have, and that's the issue, and people spend money on ridiculous things in weddings. Let's be honest, if you're married, don't think about your own wedding, because it's very difficult to think about the things that you spent on your own wedding. If you're not married, and if you are married, look at some of the weddings that you've been to, some of the weddings that you've seen take place.
Yeah.
And like we said, we're not talking necessarily about the people that need to be invited. This is like our custom within our culture, that we invite a lot of people. Khair, leave that to one side. But what were the kind of things that you saw that money was spent on that wasn't really required? It didn't add anything. Nobody talks about it until today. Okay, such and such a person's wedding. My man had a horse and carriage, bro. He showed up in a horse and carriage. More they're talking about you saying he turned up in a horse and carriage. What a flipping idiot, right? And I think this is the thing. It goes back to this thing of a desire of wanting to show off about who we are. And I think what we have to realize is, as men in our mid-20s, we're not men that are made as yet. Okay, we're men that are on the journey to becoming men. Later on in life, after the age of 40, 50, 60, if Allah gives us the life that long, inshallah, then we can talk about ourselves as as men. But that's not the case right now, and we need to be careful, especially in this day and age, with the way that money is circulating inside of this capitalistic society. We need to be careful about what we're spending money on, especially in our younger days, because the more that we look after our finances, the more that it's going to serve us better in the long term. Okay, things are getting harder; they're not getting easier. Okay, we talk about our parents and when they bought houses and the amounts that they bought houses for, in comparison to the wage that they were earning. Nowadays, it's much more difficult. It's not going to get easier. If you're sat there thinking that it's going to get easier for our generation or the future generation or our kids to come in the future, you're delusional. You're not thinking straight. It's going to get worse. So prepare.
You just mentioned about houses, but look at weddings. Like some weddings you hear, they spent 100 grand on a wedding on one day. Like people, obviously you can ask other people about marriage advice, but marriage is a thing which is going to last you until death, inshallah. If it's, that's the goal of marriage. And people are spending maybe 60, 70. You can buy a house or put a good deposit down on a house for that amount of money, but yet people are blowing it in one day. Why? As we said, to show off to others, to look good in front of others, to show that look at us. And the thing is, all the logic, all the things that we know, which make sense, to all go out the window. On these occasions. And this is why you see that a lot of people have problems when they do get married. Now the happiest people that I know was some of the people who got married during the past 2 years, where the wedding was very, very small. They invited close family, close friends. They had a very, very good meal, and they said that it was the best thing we ever did. We saved a lot of money, we saved a lot of hassle. Alhamdulillah, we got married and we're happy. Compared to people who have these grand weddings. And then, 6 months here, Allah save us all by here, or there's a divorce and stuff happen, or, the complications, and you just think, oh my God, all the money was just wasted on one day, And these things, they don't make sense to me logically, they just don't make sense.
I think this is an important thing, divorces and marriages not working out is not something new. It's going to happen. Allah save us from it, but it is going to happen. There are going to be people that are going to be not compatible. So it's important that we don't put too much investment of time or assets into something which, you know, which might become rocky. You know, this is always my advice to people as well, that, you know, once you've established your relationship, once you've established your marriage, that's when you start looking for a longer term future, your house or your cars, or you start investing or looking into your long term plans. But originally, when a person gets married, you know, they need to establish a relationship first. But I think one of the other things that you wanted to talk about are these new phenomenons. Have things like this occurred before in the past?
It's weird because I was reading a book. I'll mention the book. It's called فصول الاجتماعية from an Arabic how do I say? مفكر. Arabic thinker, writer. He was a literalist. He was, you know, a faqih. He was a qadi. You know, he was a genius basically. Ali Tantawi. His name is Ali Tantawi. So he was actually from Syria, born there in 1900s, and then he was a qadi in Saudi Arabia. He travelled into many countries. He was a very big scholar as well. So reading one of his books, and this book is, I recommend any person who can't read Arabic to read this book. The reason is because he breaks down society and all these things that we're talking about, finance and marriage, and he mentions all of this because you know, youngsters or young people would send him questions saying, look, we got this problem, what's the solution? And he will write them back, and alhamdulillah, he's actually got speeches as well, which you can find on YouTube, but they're in Arabic and stuff. So his grandson, alhamdulillah, compiled all these things. So I was reading. So there's one chapter, it says كل شيء على تقسيط, so everything on finance. So he mentions the story of him and his friend. And you have to remember that when they were in Syria, Syria was under the occupation of France, meaning that they were under colonial France and they were living under French rule. And he goes, unfortunately for us as Syrians living there, is that we took the bad habits of the French, and we left the good old they had. He goes, he was with his friend who was also a judge, and in Islam, if you want to be a judge, you've got to study to a very, very high level, you know. And he goes, one day they left work, and he said to his friend, before we go, just to, you know, eat or something outside, I think need to go pay something off. And he goes, okay, let's go. So he goes with his friend who's also a judge, and he goes, oh, I've got to go pay, I've got to go get a new table, and I've got to get a new mirror, and I've got to get a new radio. And he goes, why? He goes, the old one's a bit new, the wife said to me, get something new because when our guests come over, we want to impress them. And he goes, so how are you paying for this? He goes, oh, on finance. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, just 20 litres here, 20 litres there, 20 litres there. And he goes, okay. He goes, oh, you did? He goes, no, I've got to go somewhere else. He goes, oh, I've got to go pay for my bed. He goes, on finance? He goes, yeah, on finance. And he goes, he went to all these different places and he's paying for everything on finance. So he said to him, you know, Qadi earns very good means. He goes, of your salary, how much do you have left? He goes, about from 800 litres, I have about 100 litres left. So he goes, how do you pay for your food and your bills? He goes, you don't, that's all on finance as well. Then he says in Arabic, he goes, Innaha laysa ni'ma. He goes, this is not a blessing. He goes, this is actually a disaster and a calamity which has come to you. You know, that all your things on finance. You know, and he's writing about this in the 50s and 60s, you know, because this sort of materialistic world under French rule is a Western sort of phenomenon. And he was saying that when Syrians used to move house back in the 50s in Syria, he goes, they would take everything and they need 3-4 vans because, you know, everything was on finance. They bought stuff that they didn't need. Because, but when the French used to move, it would just be one van. And it'd be all the things which they need, and they take it to the place. You know, so these things are not actually new phenomenons. But one of the things I do encourage, and we will talk about this in other podcasts, is to read about history, to understand the different systems which are inside the world and what are going on and how they affect us as well.
Yeah, definitely.
That's something that we just wanted to mention there as well. It's not something, finance is not something new. It's just been rebranded and it's been advertised to you now in the most beautiful manner. Because they say to you, this will only cost you £45 a week, and that doesn't sound a lot to you, but when you times it by 4, that's £250. And then by the months and the year, even in America, you know what they say? They say you can get this car, but for the price of 2 Starbucks coffees a day. That's nothing. Once you start to add that up, it adds up to big money. And everything now is being advertised to you in a very nice manner, and a lot of people are falling for it, unfortunately.
I think let's move on from there, inshallah. Just a couple of tips and advice about how we use money. I think it's really important to mention here. We've talked about large-scale purchases, but the problem also exists in smaller purchases as well. Like especially with the ease of things like Amazon and Amazon Prime and how quickly you can get things. Everything's at our fingertips, you see, and some people just go on purchasing sprees, constantly getting delivery after delivery, day after day. And I think it's important, we don't fall into this kind of trap. And one of the things that I was taught is when we're making smaller purchases,
Yep.
spend 3 days thinking about whether do I actually need this thing that I'm actually going to buy, this object that I'm going to buy. Spend 3 days thinking about it first. Do I need to buy it? Do I need it? How is it going to benefit my life? After 3 days, if you decide, yeah, do you know what, I actually need this product, fantastic. But if not, then you need to think. If you are in this cycle of continuously buying things as well, you need to think, how is it hurting you?
Yeah.
How is it hurting your long-term future? And inshallah, try to come out of that. There are ways that we can, and we are engrossed. We have to admit to it. And then move on from there and take action. And I think finally, the last thing to sort of mention around this is buy quality products.
Oh, yeah. That seems to last for a long time.
Yeah, we've talked about spending money and spending large amounts of money, but sometimes you make a purchase of, I don't know, let's say for example you go to buy a bookshelf, okay? You can buy like the Argos branded bookshelves, but it might not be that it's the best quality, right? Whereas you might go to another particular company and they might be able to provide you with a more quality service for a slightly higher price.
Yeah.
It is what it is. If you're going to purchase something which you plan to keep in your house or whatever it may be, buy something that's quality. Look at something that's quality.
Yeah.
If you don't have the tools or the mind or the understanding to understand how to recognize what quality is, then get somebody who might. You might have a friend who knows about cars. Take them with you.
Yeah.
You might know somebody that can help you in buying X particular product. Use them. Use that expertise.
I think one thing that we do want to mention as well is that this whole thing of finance material is living within your means.
Mm-hmm.
If you earn, for example, just say £1,000 a month, don't be spending £1,500 a month. Why? Because it's going to catch up with you and you're going to end up in debt and it's going to eventually ruin your life. Live within your means, whatever Allah SWT has given to you.
Mm-hmm.
Live. If you earn 2,000, live within that means, but don't live a life of a person who earns 4,000 when you're only bringing in 2,000. This is one of the main things. Live within your means, and try to live a good life. And we're not saying, live a good life, alhamdulillah, but within your means,
Definitely.
Don't be excessive,
I think to add to this, like another little tip that I would give as well, which is something that I follow, is be very careful about how you allocate your money to different things as well. You might want to sit down with your finances, and this is really important. If you're unmarried, you need to sit down with your finances regularly. Every couple of months, every 3 months, every 4 months, every 6 months, or at least every year, review your finances. And if you are married, then sit with your partner. Talk about these things. It's really important that you communicate with your partner about your spending habits as a couple, as individuals. You understand what your income is. If there are ever going to be any changes to your income or your expenditure, you need to talk about it together. Okay. One of the things that I actually use is, as soon as I work a 9-to-5 job, and as soon as my pay packet comes in, I sort my salary. So immediately, I know if you were to ask me now, Kasim, and if I wanted to tell you about, if you were to ask me how much my bills come to a month, I can tell you to the pound that this is how much my bills come to every month. Okay. Because what I do is, as soon as my salary comes in, that portion of my money, which I know that is going for bills, has already gone to one side. Okay, I allocate a set amount of money, which we use for our normal day-to-day expenses. Okay, and also I then allocate a set amount of money that I'm saving, I'm putting away for saving for long term. And it's really important that we all save for our long-term future. Like we mentioned, things aren't going to get easier; they're going to get more difficult. So we need to prepare. Okay, and going beyond that, I've talked about saving, and this is like a practical tip that I've tried to give for trying to save money. But we also need to look into investing as well. And this is an entire separate topic that we need to get into. Is there anything else that you want to mention in terms of like income?
No, I think we've touched upon a lot of things. I think we can move on from that, to be honest. If anybody has any questions, put them in the comments. If you want to talk about anything else, let us know, and we can do on a different podcast, inshallah.
Yeah, so I think finally, to end with, the one thing that I said I was quite interested to talk about was these get-rich-quick schemes. And I've just mentioned just a couple of minutes ago about investing. And there's a difference between investing, Kasim, and there's a difference between gambling.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're two very different things. But you see, over the last year or so, and over the last few years, I've noticed a change within the mentality of young people. Okay, and I don't want to be this kind of person that says when we were young and be delusional that our generation was better. No, it wasn't.
No.
Our generation were involved in many problems as well.
Pyramid schemes.
Yeah,
that's what we're known for.
Yeah, our generation was known for pyramid schemes, and these pyramid schemes were unethical because the product itself that you were selling was the people that were below you.
Yeah.
You weren't selling the utility. You were selling the people that were below you. Okay, and it's really important to understand the ethics behind. I remember there were people that were involved in that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, those pyramid schemes were, although unethical, I'm not going to go into the halal or the haram, but they weren't detrimental to one's finances to an extent where people were losing thousands of pounds.
Most of the time it was a one-off payment.
Yeah.
And they never got that payment back, but that was it.
Yeah. Whereas in the last couple of years, some of the things that we've heard about from some of the youth that we know has been crazy in the amount of money that we're talking. Scams that have taken place, that people have been involved in. I think recently, a few years back, there was like the universal credit scam in which people...
It's actually still going on.
Yeah,
that
people were and are still involved in which they're trying to scam the government of thousands of pounds. But the government catches up, you see. They're not stupid. There are going to be some people that slip through the net. Naturally, it always happens like that, okay? But majority of them people have been caught and they've been told to repay the money that they've claimed.
Yeah.
And it has been in the few thousands of pounds, okay? But we know of people that have been in even worse situations, okay? And the whole thing is they've been trying to get money fast. You see, we always grew up with this concept, and this is a concept that I wouldn't say, sorry, we didn't grow up with it. We just understood the concept as individuals. I wouldn't say as a generation either, okay? But it's important that you as an individual, you're listening as well, that you understand this concept of if your hands aren't getting dirty, then that money is not clean, okay? And it's a really important concept. If you're putting in a graft, if you're doing something for your money, then that money that you're getting is clean money, is good money, is halal money, okay? It's money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in. Yeah. But if you're not getting your hands dirty, and I don't mean you have to do manual labor, okay? But if you're not getting your hands dirty, if you're not getting tired by doing your job, you'll notice yourself, your heart's not content with you not doing something to earn money. And that money is not going to be beneficial for you, okay? And there have been many things that have occurred like that. I think currently the trending thing is platforms such as like Trading 212, eToro, Free Trade. Platforms like this have provided the opportunity for young people or all people the ability to invest in particular stocks, shares, other assets. But the problem is we didn't learn which assets to invest in. Yeah. We used apps like TikTok or the word of mouth from people to invest in stocks, to invest in crypto. And the person who's divulging in this is thinking, yeah, my money is going to multiply or my money is going to grow exponentially. You know, this month I'm going to put in X amount and I'm going to get the same amount back next month and it's going to grow 100% month on month on month. It doesn't happen like that, okay? And you have to understand investing is a long-term strategy. Yeah. If you're in it for the short term, it's gambling, okay? And this is a really important distinction between the two, okay? I own assets, but I have an understanding of how them assets work, okay? And inshallah, we'll get into that. We'll discuss, you know, how to screen stocks, for example, to make sure that they are halal, to make sure that we are going into investments that are going to be beneficial for the long term. And I think finally, the last thing to end on is only invest that money that you're willing to lose. Yeah. Okay. If you are going to go down the line of investments and you are going to invest in crypto, into stocks, in other assets, that's fine. It's your choice. We can't stop you. We can't turn around and say to you and grab you by your hand and say, no, you're not doing that. Yeah. Okay. But we can try to provide you with our sincere advice. And my sincere advice is only play with that money that you're willing to lose. Yeah. If you lost that money and it would be detrimental to your finances and your ambitions and your long-term assets, and it would send you into a low mental health state, then that's problematic. Okay.
It's like when we were young, we always heard these simple quotes, but they're like golden. Like, if it's too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah.
You know, and the thing about money is that this is just what I believe anyway. Just the system of Allah. Allah has divided up your sustenance, and He gives it to you bit by bit. Why would Allah give all your sustenance at once? You know, and also there's another thing I want to point out to our generation. Is having money at a very, very young age is not always a good thing, you know, because with money comes responsibility. And what happens when a person's young, he has all this energy and he has time, and most of the time, unfortunately, if a person, his head is not screwed on, he doesn't have the right mentality, most of that money is wasted, you know. And as we know that every person will be asked what Allah's given to him, what he spent it on, you know. If it is halal, alhamdulillah. If it is haram, you know, Allah save us, you know. So even having money at a young, and this is the thing which is now on social media is glamorized. Oh, look at Zuckerberg, he was a billionaire in his 20s and his 30s, you know. But having loads of money at a very young age is sometimes not the best thing for you, you know. And the thing is, if something's too good to be true, if you get returns of investments of 100% or 200%, something sounds a bit dodgy, you know. Yeah. But yeah, we'll leave that for now.
Okay. So we'll call it an end to the episode for today.
Yeah.
There are things that we've missed out, naturally. We've tried to talk about as much as we can without wanting to try to extend it. If you've got any comments that you'd like to share about this particular topic, then feel free to leave them in the comments below. If there's anything that you feel that we missed, feel free to mention it.
If you've got any experiences, that is one thing that I do say, is that put them in the comments so other people can benefit. You don't know what experience you may have, somebody else may have had it, and you know, somebody else may benefit. You know, so don't be scared. You know, social media is there for all of us, you know, to take the good and take the bad. You know, so if you have some advice that we missed out, put it down in the comments. You know, we're all here to learn and we're all here to benefit ourselves. Yeah.
Okay. So, like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share with your friends and family.
Yeah.
And like this video. Inshallah, the next episode that we're planning to talk about is we're talking about hairstyles, dress code, and fashion.
For Muslims.
So please tune into the next episode of the Arc of Thoughts podcast. Thank you very much for listening today.
Salamu Alaykum.